Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to go for about 30 more minutes as scheduled till 2:45, and then we'll take a break and then come back for the later afternoon panels. So wanted to just pick up where we left off. There's two last questions I wanted to ask our panelists, and then we'll ask two specific questions to Justin and Lori. And then we want you to ask questions as we go too, but we'll make sure we hold aside some Q&A time at the end. But please, as we were just doing, frankly, the live interaction is even better and hopefully keeps everybody engaged. So just to kick this off, some of you touched on this a little bit already in the previous conversation, but would love to hear your take on what are the 1 to 2 top benefits of being able to make data-informed decisions. And as part of, maybe what might be obvious benefits to some, have you experienced any pushback from others in your organization or your stakeholder set that has made that more difficult to realize those benefits? We'll start with the Commit partnership together.
Absolutely. A couple of things that jump to mind very quickly is, one, we use data to open doors, and that has always helped to start the conversation so that we can then use evidence-based models to change the behavior and then look at continuous improvement, again, looking back to the data. So it's kind of a cycle that we think through when we look at data. Other pieces?
So my headspace right now is squarely in donor management, public dollars specifically, and so I was not being antisocial on the break. I partly was, but it's because back home we are in the process of hitting submit on 2 public funding grants, which I see some nods. Everybody knows how painful those can be. What is coming to mind though around the challenge is the M&E piece. So this particular grant is in the early childhood space. I mentioned that we're trying to get child care partners and districts to all speak the same language. So we've all gotten them to agree that 3rd grade reading is important. And we have a common measure for that 3rd grade reading. It's our state accountability test. It's currently the STAR test, and it has many iterations before that. Every state has their test for how you get it done. What people don't realize off the top of the bat is that 3rd grade reading is your single biggest indicator of whether or not you will graduate high school. The single biggest indicator of whether or not you're reading on 3rd grade is if you enter kindergarten ready to learn and with a high oral vocabulary. And one of the largest headaches that Ashwina's team has is, what the hell is kindergarten ready? Because there is not a standard measurement for what that looks like. It is the wild, wild west of everything from things that have been validated and pull off the shelf and districts are using and some child care facilities are using, to somebody's gut in a classroom going, yeah, that one, that's kindergarten ready, that kid not. That is not standard measurement, guys. I hate to break it to you. So for us, because we are in this weird affiliated model where we have 0 power, our only power is in the knowledge that we can bring and the smiles on our faces to convince people to use a common measurement. We also then have to use that measurement in a public grant cycle and report against it, right? So now my front of the house, back of the house are finally coming to converge at a place that is messy and not standardized. And I don't have a solution, so if anybody in this room does, we would love to hear it. And that's one of the places that we're really working within the system, the state system, the local system, looking outside at the national sector to find how can we align on one assessment for one measure that we've all decided is an appropriate one, and then how do you collect it? Right, so then moving into step 2 of collection, and what does that look like in the field, in a classroom? Are you using a classroom modeling system? Are we all using the same one? Are you all aligned on what it looks like in each domain? Are you doing quality checks against those observers? Right, so you just keep peeling back these layers, and all I'm trying to do is hit submit on a public grant to help us pay for some of this stuff. So it's all interrelated, and getting everybody in the room to talk about it can be really challenging. I will suggest breakfast tacos as an entree to help bring everybody together. It tends to work pretty well in Texas.
Thanks.
Other thing that I wanted to mention.
Harder in New York. We've got bagels.
So good.
The other thing that I wanted to mention quickly was that the idea around cherry picking data. So we might be told that, well, you're only looking at that particular class or that particular year because you know that has the best or worst outcomes depending on what point you're trying to make. And I think the other piece is sometimes when we look at the same data set, depending on who's pulling the data together and looking at that particular metric, you might have very different results, right? So I get asked, why is that number different today than it was yesterday? Or why is Michael able to see 70%, but you're seeing 76%? Tell me what's going on. Well, if we're using different data sets or a different person's pulling that data, it'll never, ever match up. And so educating folks at higher levels or at leadership levels around if you're asking 6 different people to pull the same number, we're gonna get 6 different answers.
Thanks.
That's the struggle.
So I think the fundamental thing in terms of the opportunity and what we can see is it helps us serve our beneficiaries better. And we would all say that, but I think there's really good examples of how we can transform the approach that we take there. And that's everything from in our fundraising and our supporters, and working with our supporters is taking a data-centric, which is something we're about to talk about, a data-centric approach to our supporter journeys, and providing them a richer experience in working with IRC, providing them more relevant content, providing them a more relevant journey of how they are supporting with the IRC, how their experience grows, how they can do that in all sorts of different ways, whether they're an advocate or a voice, or whether they're actually giving us financial support, or whether they're volunteering, and tying all those pieces together. So that's at sort of one end where we're looking at how can we transform that from, we just have a system to manage them into a real data-centric model that looks at how they work. The second area then, maybe the flip side of that is how do we provide services in the field? And I think there is an area where technology and really looking at data can be totally changed in some ways. And there we've got example of where we've got staff who suddenly get access to data and are able to see it and think about it in really different ways. They can be more efficient. It just sparks a whole conversation. So we have something called the Comprehensive Humanitarian Access Portal, which is just journaling all of the different security events we have around Syria and what's going on with our staff there, our staff and our beneficiaries, so that we can look at the patterns and we can monitor that, right? We are looking at things like what we call programming packages, where instead of saying, look, let's go out in the field and let's take childhood malnutrition, right? So let's put programs people in the field. They all know that you need to take a mean upper arm circumference measurement, and then that drives whether you've got inpatient or outpatient care and whether you get Plumpy Nut or some other supplement, right? And they all know that, and they get trained on that, and they maintain spreadsheets of who's got what and how to go through. And then they try to get data out of it. Well, what if we transform that approach and say, let's actually build an application that does that? Because it's a pretty simple case management scenario. And let's provide the right clinical evidence built into that in terms of learning. Let's actually have them do the casework there. Then we can just get the data and sort of making M&E invisible, right? Because right now M&E often is thought of as something on top of programs. Let's make it part of programs, part of there. And you can expand that to a concept of what if we had a humanitarian app store. That's a sort of nice, simple way to think about it for all of the different programmatic interventions, or the large number that sort of repeat compared to some of the other sort of more context-sensitive or larger programs that need to be thought through properly. So I think there's a lot of application where we can just help beneficiaries better if we think about data and we think about how we gather data and how we manage data in different ways, how we make it available to our staff. So that's what we're really, I think, fundamentally excited about. And we could talk a lot about other kinds of ways in Skype, and I think there's ways that we can analyze our information at an AI level there. But I think that's the sort of heart of it for us right now.
Thanks.
You mind repeating the question? I was so engaged. I know.
Yes.
I want to go measure my arm right now.
You're doing fine. There's no supplementation.
What are the top 1 to 2 benefits that you all see from making data-informed decisions now?
Okay.
And is there any pushback you've experienced on the way to getting to realize those benefits as you've been implementing this?
So I brought up the example about workforce, but we also have mental health professionals, and these are true professionals in their fields, teaching professionals, right? And they're not used to interacting with this data. This is something new to them. And to show that we have, an evidence-based model that we developed, we're getting results, and we coalesce around this, right? So like I said before they hired an IT director, they had a research director. So we had someone from the University of Texas, which is in our backyard. We also have what they call an IRB, I think it's investigative review.
Institutional.
Institutional Review Board.
And so when we look at evidence-based practices, or we need to adopt one, because everything out there is usually around adults, not so much around youth. So we have to take one and change it up a little bit. And our director of research knows how to make that choice and how to include a professional, get their buy-in, and we take it to an IRB for a rollout. And then we take that data, of course, we're going back to the IRB with it, we're making studies with it, but the professionals engaged with it. So now they can coalesce around a new standard for kinder ready, right? Because they were able to see it. So when you're a service provider, like we were before, you're just, the kid's leading with a smile, you're going with the gut, that everyone's happy, we must have done well. So it was this kind of institutional change. We did make sure we did our best. We're always trying to improve that everything's above board. We're getting the proper consents, we get the review boards. And actually, we now have a problem because our institutional review board, UT, they're so backed up that we're actually starting a new one amongst us nonprofits in Austin. You might want to think about joining them.
Yeah, that sounds great. What's the name of it?
Because of the backlog that we've had, and because there's so much this evidence-based model kind of revolution happening. So people are on board, they're accepting it, and those frontline service professionals that have gone so long without it, teachers have a very long tenure, making that data appealing in the interaction that we see with it, yeah, it's changed the way we work in workforce development and mental health.
Thanks. Okay, last rapid fire question for each of you, and then I will ask Justin and Lori to kind of share additional thoughts on this one, is one piece of advice, your top piece of advice that you give to other nonprofits who are looking to digitally transform, to use an evidence-based model. What would be your top piece of advice for them? You can go in whatever order. Yeah.
I think I said it earlier because I think there was someone that brought it up, but just however fast you think you're going to go, just kind of cut that in half. It's going to take a while, and building relationships and building the right support within the organization might take some time, and then building out the systems themselves.
Start with the why. And if you don't know it, YouTube Centric and watch the video, but always start with your why. You'll get to the how, and you'll get to the what, but know why you're doing it.
Yeah, to build on that, absolutely, the technology guy says, absolutely don't start with technology, as you guys all know, right? Start with the why, and bring in the multiple whys, because there's not one oftentimes in organizations. Bring in the field, as we've talked about, bring in the program leaders, bring in the leadership team to co-create on that why, and then getting to the how is far more easier. And then comes technology as the third step.
Rapid fire for me, when you frame that why, the client has to be in that statement. And we always make sure we do that. It's easy to say, oh, we're more efficient payroll.
Yeah.
How do we tie that back to the client?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just say all of the above. Really think whole organizational about how you're doing it. Transformation is a transformation everywhere. So think broadly about the impact of what you're trying to do and how you're going to get there, starting with that why. And I think tech can demonstrate along the way, but it absolutely needs to come last in terms of what people are comfortable talking about.
That's great. And Lori, what about from your experience? What advice would you give to organizations looking to undergo something like this?
I think somebody mentioned it over here earlier, but cross-functionally, or bringing in all of the relevant parties, is vital. Because what happens, everybody comes from a different perspective, and unless you have all parties together, you really do not arrive at the right solution. And I think that's vital.
Justin, what about you? Any other wisdoms to share
I
just for that
shared my
particular
wisdom.
question?
That's rapid fire.
That was it.
Boom, right in, popcorn. I like
All
it.
directions.
All right.
I've turned off my mic so I don't sound like Darth Vader. Can everybody hear me? All
Oh,
right.
yeah, just
You
fine.
still sound like Darth.
I know, right? Microsoft.
So now, because I want to make sure we get to ask Justin and Lori a few questions specifically too, sorry as I'm, is if you both could share some best practices as you look across the different nonprofits that you've worked with or seen Microsoft work with, around how do you pull together data from project silos across different program areas, and how can you utilize things like machine learning and AI to make that data impactful? And Justin, you talked a bit about start with what you got, so maybe even starting there.
No, so I think just a converge on some concepts here today. I think we've talked about, before we get into the technology roadmap, the anatomy of a successful enterprise level change, right? All of the elements of that. The leadership support, the co-creation cross-functionally, having a pragmatic roadmap and approach, full change management strategy. We all get that, but somehow, like when we get into the thick of it, we forget pieces of it. All of us do. And so I think that's been therapeutic, at least for me. Then I think the other concept we talked about is we don't need to start with a rip and replace of your ERP system to get at data. We start at a much, much more pragmatic level, which is let's figure out how to take the data we have and let's figure out how to get it to the cloud. If we're an affiliated organization, let's take that data and let's create a data hub strategy, as messy as it may be, and as 15,000 indicators you may find. That's the beginning of establishing that understanding. And then let's use some off-the-shelf tools like Power BI to get some basic quick win visualizations in place so that we can fuel our efforts and bring insights forward. That's, I think, what I would say is the crawl step, but frankly, the stage that many organizations in this room and around the world are kind of in based on how we've all grown up. And I think Commit is a great example of an organization that did just that, moved it into the cloud and used some of the tools the cloud can provide to understand statistically what the correlation is between educational outcomes. Another organization that's in the middle of that is Oxfam. They've got a very broad network, and they have an explicit data hub strategy that we're working with Michael Duggan, who's the international CIO there, who you guys may know, and we're trying to take that blueprint and make sure it's available for the sector as you guys think about your data hub strategies. At the WOC level, it's about standardizing processes. It's about adopting things like the common data model that moves more of the enterprise onto a standard footing. And Dan Lamont, who's not paying attention there in the back, is the CEO of Threshold and formerly the CEO of Round Corner, and is the architect behind a lot of the work we're doing together with Dan on the common data model. He's at the center of the most recent publish that we've done, and he'll be working cross-sector and cross-partner to continue to iterate on that data model so that it's more and more useful for organizations. And there, also Dan is working on ensuring we've got the accelerators in place for our CRM-based constituent management solutions, as well as later our ERP-based F&O solutions. And then run, and this isn't serial, by the way, some organizations start in a different place, is really then using some of the advanced intelligent cloud capabilities to get predictive in your operation. And the work that the World Bank is doing or Amnesty International is doing, once you have that data estate cleaned up, really the power is incredible. I remember I started at Microsoft. I was listening to the AmeriCare Supply Chain Challenge. I started at Microsoft ripping and replacing Microsoft supply chain infrastructure. And we had AI capabilities there that were the same ones that we have today. They're very expensive. The difference now is that every organization can use AI, and we have the power of the cloud behind it, which makes it super affordable. But we have to start with getting our data in order. And once our data is in order, then we can start to use some of these amazing tools. As you get ready for that, we hope to have a toolkit out there that you're able to draw upon and work with one another so that we're not recreating the wheel in every organization around the world. So it's a journey. It's never done. It'll go past your career, and your children will be working on the journey as well. But hopefully we make a hell of a lot of progress over the next couple of years together.
Thanks.
So.
Great. Down to your grandchildren.
Yeah, I think so, probably. Yeah.
I think two things, and you said it earlier, analytics, glass is half full, half empty. We have to be careful about our analytics. I come from a finance background, so when you say you ask 6 people the same thing and they all pull different data, I will tell you that scares me to death. I think data is dangerous, right? It can help us do our jobs really well, but we have to ensure that it's used correctly, that people who are pulling the analytics are actually pulling it appropriately. And the third part of that with data, and I've seen this in a lot of organizations, the data is not good. So be careful with data that's not good. And there's so many disparate systems that you have to cleanse the data. And that is a lot of work, and people don't have time. But if you want the analytics and to be able to use the data to drive your outcomes and supporting your programs, you have to ensure that you've got data at a point where it is actually good and viable and can hold or can stand up to the questioning and people that are in the know. A teacher that says, we've known that for years. Oh, thank heavens you have data that can support it now. I mean, that's really where everybody'd like to go. People who are in the field already know. We're actually lagging behind trying to get them data to support, because that's what people want. People want something that says, yes, I can support that cause because you just proved to me that we will hit 2 million people or whatever that might be. So that's, and I think AI, I think just taking the human element out of it, humans, when you talk to people, you'll learn a lot, but we don't always have the data to support what people in the field already know. And I think trying to figure out how can we get that data so that we can support and really move that cause is extremely vital. And now we're starting to get some of the tools that'll actually help us generate that easier and faster.
Thanks. So let's open it up for questions, comments from folks in the room. What did we not cover? What did we start to talk about that you want to know more about? We've got about 5-10 minutes for questions.
Or who has a common kindergarten readiness assessment that I can have? You do?
Frederick does.
Comment. I have a 2.5-year-old, and I have another one on the way. So one thing I noticed in terms of trying to review for daycare in general, there's not a good standard of statistics, nothing to tell you whether daycare is going to get your child ready.
Nope.
It's more on your instincts as a parent. You're like,
Yep.
so there is no numbers really, right? For that right now.
We're still searching.
Yeah,
So there's no, like, if
Yeah, so
school-
there are what are called QRIS systems. Each state has one. In Texas, it's the Texas Rising Star, and they rate a program. The federal system, the Head Start programs, use something similar and tell you kind of where they are in a quality index. Those quality domains are not consistently evaluated within that domain. So I think this is where, one, we need help in the field to help standardize how we actually measure. And then the second piece is we need help from brains kind of at this level on how you aggregate childcare data, right? Like how do you get the information of attendance, of ratios, of office hours, right? All standardized in one data system that is probably going to be a data hub, but we haven't identified who would own that hub, if it's public, if it's private, if it's nonprofit, and then how do you push that information back out into the field to make it useful for parents, to also make it useful for a school district, because you as a parent need that information to help place your child, right? And your school district is going to need it when your child goes into kindergarten, because there's a wealth of information that you know about your 2.5-year-old, or at that point in time, your 5-year-old. You will have known if they know letters, if they know numbers, how they are behaviorally, what their mental health status is. You know it, their teacher knows it, but there is no clear way that that kindergarten teacher is going to have that 5-year record that your student has. There's no individualized personal record that travels with a student. So if you're writing down in a book, that's going to be one that travels with you as a child. A transcript before kindergarten, and that gets written down, right? You would want that transcript, think of it at the other end. When you graduate high school, or if you graduate college, who owns that transcript right now? The institution, not the student.
Right.
So you have to go to an office hours that have weird hours, by the way. I swear to God, the people that work less amount of time than bank tellers are the people that own the transcript hours. They are there from like 10:35 in the morning to maybe 3:07. You don't really know, but you have to physically go and request it. And then they physically mail a transcript to another institution. But that's your information, right? Once you're 18, that should be your information. So you don't have a mobile transcript that is written, that is clear, that is understandable, accessible, trustworthy, safe, all of those things. So one that can start from when you're young all the way to and through, that's where your currency is in the education space is going to be.
D365 client portal plug. Just throw that out there. We're going to start
Well,
doing that.
well,
Yes, exactly.
just one point, and I know we don't want to go too deep into the scenario, but it links back to an issue that we're working on in the humanitarian space, which is there's about 1 billion people that don't have an identity on the planet, like no identity whatsoever. So when it comes to provisioning any sort of rights, let alone educational certifications, there's no way to connect that. I don't have the answer, but we're making an investment with UNICEF to build, and with ID 2020 and other organizations, to work on how do we create a digital identity framework, a blockchain-based framework that's not Microsoft, it's a broad cross-industry effort. And then how do we create a learning platform and a digital learning passport that follows persistently that identity. And the scenario here is children that are on the move. There's a whole lot of children that are coming in and out of education systems because of different economic circumstances. And we're working on building that. But it would be interesting, we should share what we're doing and see if there's a...
And that's a great one. And the Children on the Move is one where we're not trying to do reconciliation. We work with UNICEF on that.
Right.
So the idea of a persistent educational record, or if you're talking about some situation like Syria, where you actually had pretty high quality schools and pretty high quality records.
So soothing.
That is nice.
You know, suddenly you've got Syria, which is destroyed, and where are your educational records? They're all sitting in paper at the bottom of something, right? And so that's there. And then the ID 2020 project, which we're working on in Thailand, I think, you know, there you've got really long-term kind of refugee situations, right? And how do you create an educational record or any kind of health or educational record so that people can actually transfer out of that refugee situation? And, you know, a national government can look at them and have some idea of how to evaluate them. So that concept of digital identity and being able to attach things is another just really fascinating space. It's just a fundamental building block of that space.
And fundamental human right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, question in the back, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about an assessment for this space that's a little more concrete than your children or your kindergarten assessment. It would be great to combine these two things together. But what about a data management capabilities assessment that is somewhat standardized for the industry that will help people actually build their internal human capacity for doing this?
Has anybody done anything like that to figure out what your
It's
capacity
hugely
is?
important. I always remember the story. I always remember, sorry, a VP of programs came to me once, and this was not IRC, and said, "Thank you for the basic Excel classes that you started." The IT department just started this as a general capability, actually for another ERP project, another Microsoft provision, product Navision though. And she was a very honest person. She was really thankful because the Excel classes we'd started let her talk to her staff. And they were busy sending her Excel spreadsheets. She had no idea how to do them or see them. So I think that basic capacity building, Julie, who's here from IRC, also knows part of our ERP project, and Lori helping, you know, basic capacity building is a huge part of what we're trying to do, just basic office skills. So just vastly important.
Does anybody in the room, do you use an assessment? Have you used an assessment for your organizations to see where you might need to start first? Formal or informal?
There's a lot of good security assessments out there. We have to do HIPAA compliance. We have mental health records. That doesn't touch where you're going, but it does hit a certain level of readiness. If you're ready to provide services and have electronic health records, HIPAA assessments have been really helpful for us.
And Frederick, you should just spend 1 minute to talk about the DNA assessment that you've built and then where this could go. Because it was a leading the witness question he asked.
So yes, we then opened the Center for the Digital Nonprofit, which I was told to lead about a month ago, so this is all pretty new to me. We have a couple of assessments. One we call the Digital Nonprofit Abilities Assessment, which is basically an organizational assessment on where you stand in terms of taking on a digital transformation. And today, it's it's funny because whatever you're talking about resonates. It's exactly where we are. It's a survey monkey data collection process goes into an Excel spreadsheet. We graph you and put you on some kind of partner quadrant type of thing. We turn that into a PDF via PowerPoint, and all this is manual processes. And the the underlying logic and the underlying underlying analysis is valid and is working. We're looking for a third party to come in and actually put their stamp of approval on it. But what we're looking for now is automating all of this, and you know, go to SurveyMonkey, go to whatever data collection you want, but put it into a real database, apply some visual or data visualization to it, and crank out the automatic analysis, and then have the human people come in and look at this a little bit more, you know, with value-added analysis and recommendation.
Now, Frederick, we've used that survey for NetHope members, and we've got 50 or 60 NetHope members. There's some non-NetHope members in the room. Spend just 1 minute on how if I'm not a NetHope member, I can tap into the knowledge of this survey.
If you were going to take the survey, you'd have to pay for it, big time.
Me? Oh, yeah. And you know I do that, Frederick.
As a matter of fact, I mean, this is a little sensitive, but we actually did have a conversation earlier this morning with the non-member, and we're delighted to get this validated outside of the NetHope family. So I can share the links to where you can find this later on. And we are, especially when we get this to scale, we want everybody to take it.
It provides two things, I think. For whatever you look, you can use many different frameworks, but essentially plots your organization on a capability maturity curve, compares you to other organizations that are like you and not like you. And I think probably is an interesting input as you think about the case for change and creating some evidence on where you're at and what you need to do for your board and your organization. So,
a couple of things that we're doing with it, and that is we are taking people through, you know, a process of digital transformation, and the Microsoft D3 or Dream Design Deliver process is one of those. There are people that are not willing to take that investment to start out with, and so we provide people with this digital skills, or the digital non-audit skills assessment, which takes people into a learning path and materials that they can pick up and along some, we call it digital skills framework. And we're also doing high-low sessions. So we're going in and finding people that are scoring high in certain areas with the DNA assessment, and pairing them with people that are scoring low and having learning sessions along that. So that's a very low investment type of thing, but super valuable from that.
I just want to pick up on one thing there in terms of the case for change. And I think whether you do a Dream Design Deliver session, which we've done, they're great, you should do them. But I think the preparing the organization and making that case is also super important. We didn't really touch on that yet. Transformations are inherently messy, right? Your data, the first data you're going to get, 2 people look at it and they're going to be, it's not going to be right? And how that gets elevated through the organization, how that gets escalated, how that gets handled over multiple years, you're going to go through a transformation. Getting the case for change is super important, because what that does is it prepares your executives for that kind of messiness. And there's all sorts of statistics as to how many transformations really fail in significant ways. And one of the key things is these are long projects. They tend to exceed people's careers at an organization. You've got turnover. All sorts of factors go into this, but messiness is one of them. And so making sure you really create sort of, some people term it a burning platform. And what that simply is shorthand for is, once you start this change, you can't go back. And you're on this journey and you're going to finish it, and everybody's bought into finishing that journey, and we're not going to get 6 months in and say, you know what, it's not too bad where we were. So I think that preparation is a very, very important step.
We utilize the project management professional model, the PMP, where you chart case for change, charter, you get your exec to sign, you put board member to sign, and this is your ticket, right?
I like the burning platform concept, absolutely. And I think it's a really good point into the case for change. There's lots of materials on there how to do this. But I like the term burning platform, because it really shows like there is no going back. It's not just that there's a good case and we think it's okay. It's no, we have to do this. And on the larger the transformation, the deeper it is, the more you're going to hit some problems and people will start thinking about the old days.
One last question, go for it.
Forgive me for being off topic, but what I was wondering was what would help Microsoft and all of us here probably did you think of adding nonprofit demo data? Because that would help the implementation and our end users understand more relating to the data that we're used to seeing. Because we end up using manufacturing as a demo and all that. So are you there yet?
That's an excellent point. I think, Dan, I think as we think about our accelerators, whether it's program, case management, gift in kind, as we were talking about earlier today, what we're thinking about is sample applications that accelerate development. We're thinking about connectors to common data sources. We're thinking about common templates for reporting and outputs that need to be managed. I think thinking about a representative sample of demo data for testing and development purposes is something that is absolutely worthwhile considering. You know, at some level, nonprofit is a tax code, and there are very wide range of organizations, even here in this room. But I think when you get down to a process level, case management or gift in kind, I think you can get down to a representative sample of demo data. So I think I appreciate the comment. It's good input as we think about the accelerator concept that we'll take on board.
Is it quick?
Very quick, a little bit off topic, but maybe I could use these mighty brains here to help with this challenge. We have SharePoint, many different site collections, SharePoint Online. We still have file servers with terabytes of data. Microsoft Desktop Search years ago really kind of stepped it up. We liked it a lot, and it seemed like it was moving to this one kind of Google-like box eventually where you can type in a search and query your data in disparate locations. I find search on SharePoint awkward, and it would be nice. Is Microsoft moving towards any kind of solution like that?
Well, I'll answer the question directly, but from the practitioners in the room, any guidance you provide, kind of pragmatic.
So the issue with the SharePoint search is you have to define those indices on those SharePoint lists, whereas Microsoft on the desktop, they did all the indices building for you. So there's a whole component that you got to get trained on how to create these indices on your SharePoint list. So we're going through that too, because our ED had a hard time finding like a time sheet or something, and she's crazy. So it highlighted an issue, right? She felt comfortable to communicate that to me, and it turns out other people are having that issue. So right, there is a gap that has to be filled right now by internal knowledge, whereas Microsoft took that on the desktop, they didn't take it on in SharePoint. So we do see that issue at times. The SharePoint product is evolving so fast. It is so fast, becoming so powerful. If you go to that the Business Application Summit, the things they do with SharePoint blows my mind.
SharePoint's cool. There's a lot you can do with indices. Search is a really hard space because everybody wants search to behave exactly the way they do and give them the thing at the top of the list that they want. I won't comment on search and technology, but I think the one thing you can also do is make sure that the way you organize SharePoint, the mental models, the sort of knowledge architecture that you have in there is well sourced from your organization. Getting in somebody to do a knowledge or an information audit is super helpful in terms of the mental models you're asking your staff to adopt to find the things that they want on top of search.
That's great. So what's the end state that we all want, even in our lives today? We want to be able to ask a question in a box and get a freaking answer, not a bunch of blue links, right? Mm-hmm. We all want that, right? I'm shopping for a car right now, so man, I tell you, trunk space. You gotta. So we're moving in that direction. So the investments that we're making into Cortana Analytics, and Cortana will power all of our search capabilities across all data estates over time. Now today you have multiple data estates. You have a SharePoint library that you've got to arrange. You have unstructured data estates that you can use Cortana Analytics to ask through natural language questions. And over time that will converge. So you will have one search platform that spans your enterprise. But right now, we have to do a little bit of the plumbing ourselves to organize our SharePoint libraries and to ensure that we're taking structured and unstructured data into the cloud, again, through that whole data hub strategy that we were talking about, and turning on Cortana Analytics and using natural language search capability so that you can start accessing some of those powerful capabilities. And then we will be unifying that strategy. It's a little bit of a cumbersome answer, but it is the reality of where we're headed today.
Great.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thanks to everybody on the panel for your time and all this, the wisdom you shared.